My mom greeted me at the door by saying either pay our mortgage or get out. I calmly replied, "Message received." She thought she'd see another payment. She didn't hear from me for the next 8 years. I am 35 years old, and I run a sports rehabilitation and physical therapy clinic. It's a modest space that perpetually smells of peppermint oil, eucalyptus, and the heavy-duty menthol patches I buy in bulk because my patients swear by them and they cost a fraction of the name brand stuff. The clinic isn't glamorous. The waiting room chairs are covered in a beige vinyl that has seen better days, but they are comfortable. The lighting is that standard fluorescent hum that makes everyone look a little bit exhausted, but the equipment is top tier. I built this place with my own 2 hands, blood, sweat, and a terrifying amount of debt over the course of 7 years. I started with a single rented room in the back of a martial arts gym, working on blown-out knees and torn rotator cuffs for guys who couldn't afford to miss a shift at the warehouse. I took every walk-in, worked every local weekend 5K marathon tent, and slowly built a reputation. I mention all of this because my family's perception of my career and my money is the rotting foundation this entire story is built on. The drive to my brother Brandon's house for Thanksgiving took exactly 22 minutes. I had spent the previous night baking a homemade pecan pie from scratch. I don't even like baking, but I did it because it was a tradition my grandmother started, and I was trying, as I always did, to keep the peace. I also brought a 6-pack of expensive craft ginger ale because my sister-in-law Vanessa had suddenly decided she was sensitive to artificial sweeteners. Before I even merged onto the highway, I felt that familiar heavy tightness in the center of my chest. If you come from a family that views you not as a person but as a utility, you know exactly what this tightness feels like. It's an early warning system, a biological radar that activates the moment you are within a 10-mile radius of people who love what you do for them, but not who you are. I had to park 3 blocks away from Brandon's house. The street was crammed with cars, stacked bumper to bumper, half of them parked illegally on the brown autumn grass. The wind coming off the street was bitter and hollow, slicing right through the thin wool of my coat. I walked the 3 blocks carrying the pie in one hand and the ginger ales in the other, dreading the moment I would have to turn the brass knob on their front door. Brandon's house is a sprawling, slightly outdated split level in a neighborhood where everyone desperately pretends they are wealthier than they are. The kind of subdivision where the HOA cares more about the color of your mailbox than the structural integrity of your roof. Vanessa had decorated the front porch with an aggressive amount of seasonal decor gourds, faux rustic wooden signs that said "Gather," and an oversized wreath that looked like it cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I pushed the door open, and was instantly hit by a wall of sound heat and the smell of roasting meat and burnt butter. There were at least 45 people crammed into the house. It was absolute chaos. The television in the living room was glaring a football game that half the room was screaming at. A baby I didn't recognize was having a total meltdown on the staircase. 2 of my younger cousins were sliding across the hardwood floor in their socks, nearly crashing into a folding table loaded with casseroles. A woman from my mother's church was aggressively reorganizing the dessert station, looking offended by everything around her. I navigated through the maze of folding chairs and winter coats piled on the banister. I nodded at my dad, who was stationed in his usual corner. He gave me a slight upward tilt of his chin, his maximum effort for a greeting, and immediately looked back at the TV. He had perfected the art of being physically present while completely emotionally absent. I hadn't even fully stepped into the kitchen before my mother's voice cut through the noise. She didn't turn around from the stovetop where she was violently mashing sweet potatoes. "Ethan," she said. She didn't say it like a greeting. She said it like a warden calling a prisoner's number. I set the pecan pie down on the granite counter, moving a stack of dirty plates out of the way. "Hey, Mom, happy Thanksgiving. I brought the pie." She stopped mashing. She didn't look at the pie. "The mortgage is due on Tuesday. I need to pause here and make something crystal clear." It was not the demand for money that shocked me. I had heard variations of the bill is due, we're short this month, and we need a favor so many times over the last half decade that the words had lost all meaning. What paralyzed me was the venue. She didn't pull me into the pantry. She didn't call me the night before. She didn't even drop her voice. She said it at full volume right at the threshold of the kitchen and the living room, with dozens of people standing within earshot. I kept my voice low, trying to keep things from getting worse. Mom, we talked about this Tuesday. I already told you I'm completely tapped out this month. I have payroll to cover. The noise around us faded fast. My cousin stopped sliding across the floor. The woman from church froze with a pie server in her hand. Conversations in the dining room stopped mid-sentence. In a matter of seconds, all 45 people in the house, including neighbors, relatives, and even her pastor, were staring at me. My mom finally turned around. Her face was hard and emotionless. It was the same look she always wore when she had already decided she was going to get her way. Either pay the mortgage, she said, her voice filling the silent room, or get out. It hit me like a punch. She had picked the perfect moment to embarrass me in front of everyone. Vanessa sat on the couch, slowly swirling her wine before letting out a mocking laugh. Let's see how you survive in the real world without us, Ethan. I looked at Brandon. He stood by the refrigerator with a beer in his hand, staring at the floor instead of looking at me. My dad gave his usual little shrug and went right back to pretending none of this involved him. My hands started shaking, so I pressed them against the cold granite countertop. You're really doing this, right here in front of everybody? I asked quietly. My mother stepped closer, and I caught the smell of her expensive perfume. I am done keeping your secrets, she announced. We fed you, we gave you a home, we carried you when you had nothing. Either you pay what this family is owed, or you do not come back. I am tired of supporting your little lotion-rubbing hobby while we struggle. She called my licensed medical practice, the clinic I had sacrificed years to build, a glorified lotion-rubbing hobby in front of my entire family and her pastor. I let out one short laugh. It was not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes when the humiliation is too much to process. Vanessa started clapping slowly from the couch. Preach, Karen, she muttered. The silence was unbearable. Even the baby crying in the back sounded loud. I looked at my mom, then Brandon, who still would not meet my eyes, and finally at Vanessa. Message received, I said. I did not yell or make a scene. I grabbed my coat, picked up the 6-pack of craft ginger ale because I had paid $30 for it, and left the pecan pie on the counter beside the dirty dishes. They could keep it. I walked past the silent guests, stepped outside, and quietly closed the door behind me. I got into my car, locked the doors, and rested my forehead against the freezing steering wheel. The neighborhood was quiet except for the faint sound of the football game coming from nearby houses. I sat there for 20 minutes, just breathing. Little by little, the panic disappeared. The humiliation faded too. What replaced it was not anger. Anger is loud and reckless. This was cold, calm, and clear. The part of me that had spent years making excuses for my family finally shut down. In its place was someone who saw everything exactly as it was. To understand what happened next, you need to know how someone becomes the family bank. It never happens all at once. Nobody tells you they are going to drain your savings for years. It starts with small favors. When I was 30 and had just opened my first clinic, my parents called because they were short on their electric bill. Just until Friday, sweetheart, my mom said, I sent them $85. Friday came and went, and I never got it back. I did not even ask, because who starts a fight with their parents over $85? 3 months later, Brandon's truck transmission failed. He needed the truck for work and asked me for $1,200. I swear I'll pay you back in installments, bro, he promised. I paid the mechanic myself. Brandon never paid me back a single dollar. I let it go because he was my older brother, the same guy who used to stand up for me when I got picked on in middle school. After that, the requests only got bigger. Dad needed new winter tires because his were completely worn out. Mom needed a root canal her cheap insurance would not cover. Then it was school clothes for Brandon and Vanessa's kids, then groceries whenever Brandon's work hours were cut. Their Range Rover Evoque lease is 3 payments behind. The room went completely still. It felt like all the air had been sucked out. Vanessa froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "What?" Mom asked, looking back and forth between us. "The lease is under Brandon's name," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The lender has already sent 2 final notices. I know because the automatic payment for that SUV has been charging my clinic's business credit card." "You stole my card information, Vanessa. You've been taking $650 every month so you could pretend to be successful on Instagram." Mom spun toward Brandon. "Is that true? You've been stealing from your brother?" Brandon looked sick. He grabbed the counter so hard his knuckles turned white. I didn't know it was his card," he stammered, staring at Vanessa. "She told me it was covered through a corporate sponsorship." "Corporate sponsorship?" I laughed. "I am the corporation, Brandon. I've been paying for her fake boss lady lifestyle while I was living on ramen." "I didn't steal anything," Vanessa yelled, her face turning bright red. "It was a billing mistake. The Apple Pay accounts got mixed up. I was going to pay you back after my wellness brand launched." "I canceled the card at 4 o'clock this morning," I said, ignoring her. "The bank flagged every charge as fraud. Good luck when the repo truck shows up." I pointed at the papers on the table. "If you want my help from now on, it won't be money. It'll be advice. Cancel the Evoque. Sell the designer clothes. Cut the streaming services. Call the mortgage company today and ask for a forbearance program. They would rather work with you than foreclose. Those are your real options." Vanessa folded her arms. "And what's Brandon supposed to do while all that happens? Magically make money?" "He can get a second job," I answered. "Deliver pizzas, work in a warehouse, do what regular people do when they're broke." Mom slammed her hand on the granite island, making the coffee mug shake. "We are not laborers, Ethan. We are an educated family. Your brother is not cleaning toilets just to satisfy your ego." I looked at her and could not believe she actually meant it. "Then you'll be renters," I said. Nobody spoke. Nobody even moved. They finally realized the truth. The family bank was closed. "You think you're better than us," Vanessa snapped, "just because you rub people's backs for a living." "No," I said as I buttoned my jacket. "I just live in reality. You can keep living in your fantasy." I turned and headed for the front door. "Where are you going?" Brandon asked, his voice barely holding together. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "Home." Mom frowned. "Your apartment?" "No," I said as I opened the door and the cold November air rushed inside. "My house, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, hardwood floors. I closed on it last Tuesday. I wanted one thing in my life that belonged only to me." Behind me I heard Vanessa gasp. Mom started yelling again, calling me a traitor and saying I would regret everything, that God would punish me. I never looked back. I walked to my car, started the engine, turned the heat all the way up, and drove away. For the first time in 5 years, I was driving to a home with only my name on the deed. It has been 3 weeks since Thanksgiving, and everything fell apart exactly the way I expected. The first attack came through voicemail. By Friday, Mom realized I had blocked her number, so she started calling from Google Voice numbers instead. She left 14 voicemails in 3 days. Everyone followed the same pattern. The first was pure rage. "You're dead to me. You destroyed this family over a little money." By the 5th message, she switched to guilt. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. If he has a heart attack, it'll be your fault." By the 11th voicemail, she had already moved on to bargaining. "Just cover the mortgage one last time, Ethan. Just help us get through January. I swear I will never ask you again." I saved every voicemail into a secure cloud folder labeled evidence, then deleted them from my phone. Vanessa went a different direction. She flooded my WhatsApp with voice messages. She was not angry anymore. She sounded desperate and completely unhinged. In less than 2 days, she pitched me 3 different business ideas. The biggest one was a dropshipping business, and she wanted me to invest $10,000 as an angel investor. She promised a 40% return by Easter. When I ignored every message, She changed her story and threatened to sue me for defamation because I had called her a thief in front of Brandon. I simply sent her a copy of the credit card fraud report I had filed with the bank. She never contacted me again. After that came the family smear campaign. Aunts and cousins I had not talked to in years suddenly started posting vague messages on Facebook. It is sad when the younger generation forgets who raised them. Money changes people, but family lasts forever. I muted every one of them. I never replied because I knew that was exactly what they wanted. Silence bothered them far more than any argument ever could. The biggest moment came about a week later. I was finishing paperwork at the clinic after closing time. The waiting room was empty when the bell over the front door rang. I expected the cleaning crew, but instead my mom walked in. She was wearing her expensive wool coat and carrying her designer purse. She stood quietly in the middle of the waiting room looking around. It hit me that she had never visited my clinic before. She had always claimed she was too busy. I watched her eyes move across the room, taking in my medical degrees on the wall, the modern therapy equipment, the spotless treatment tables, and the framed pictures of local athletes I had helped recover from injuries. I could almost see her searching for something to criticize, anything that would make what I built seem less impressive. She ran one finger across the polished reception desk. "Nice place," she said softly. "Must be nice building all this on the sacrifices your family made." I set my clipboard down without raising my voice. "This place was built on 80-hour work weeks and instant noodles, Mom." She looked at me. "You embarrassed me, Ethan. You told me to pay your mortgage or leave in front of 45 people. You humiliated me in front of Pastor Collins. You cornered me in front of 45 people," I replied. "You expected me to hand over my wallet. I just showed everyone what was really happening." For a few seconds she said nothing. She stared at the floor, and for the first time in years I thought I saw her confidence crack. "We're going to lose the house, Ethan," she whispered. It was the most honest thing I had heard from her in a long time. "Then you need to make real changes," I said calmly. "Get rid of the luxury cars, downgrade the internet, stop buying expensive organic groceries. Brandon needs another job. Dad can work part-time again. There are options. You just refuse to accept them." Her expression hardened again. "We believed in you when you were nobody. You owe us." I took a slow breath, the smell of eucalyptus filling the room. "I already paid what I owed," I answered. $84,350. I kept every receipt. That debt is over. I walked to the front door and held it open. Cold night air rushed into the clinic. "If you want to be part of my life, then come back as my mother," I said. "But if you're looking for a bank, that bank is closed forever." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she realized I meant every word. Without saying anything else, she tightened her grip on her purse, walked outside, and disappeared into the parking lot. A few more weeks have passed and things have finally become quiet. Mom has not called again. The Google voice numbers stopped too. I think she finally accepted that I am not changing my mind. 4 days ago, Brandon sent me a text. It was short, with no excuses or requests for money. I got a second job working nights at the Amazon fulfillment center. It sucks, but it pays the property taxes. Vanessa hates it because I'm never home, but whatever. I stared at that message for almost 20 minutes. I started typing several replies, then erased every one of them. In the end, all I did was react with a thumbs up. It was not forgiveness, but it was my way of recognizing that he had finally accepted reality. I truly hope he figures things out. As for me, I am sitting in my new house. It is not a mansion or anything close to it. It is just a simple 3-bedroom ranch built in the 1980s. But for the first time in years, every inch of it feels like mine. The kitchen walls were painted the ugliest mustard yellow color I had ever seen, and I knew they would be the first thing I changed. There was also a floorboard outside the master bedroom that squeaked every single time I stepped on it. Out back stood a huge old oak tree that dropped leaves non-stop, which meant I spent nearly every weekend raking the yard. And honestly, I loved every bit of it. During my first week there, I slept on a $40 air mattress in the living room because I could not afford real furniture yet. I drank my coffee from paper cups, sat on the hardwood floor with my laptop, and opened my budgeting program. I built a brand new monthly budget. Mortgage paid, utilities paid, clinic expenses covered, groceries paid, savings funded, family bailouts, $0. At first, seeing that zero almost felt wrong. For years, my brain had been trained to expect another emergency, another desperate phone call, another crisis only my money could fix. I kept waiting for the next disaster. Some mornings I even woke up in a panic and reached for my phone to check the family group chat. Then I remembered it was muted. The phone stayed silent. One morning I got up at 6 o'clock, walked into that ugly mustard yellow kitchen, brewed a pot of cheap strong coffee, and stood by the window watching the sun rise over my backyard. The house was completely quiet. No phone buzzing, no arguments, no guilt trips. Just me, the squeaky floorboard, and a house with only my name on the deed. I know some people will probably think I went too far. Maybe keeping a spreadsheet for 5 years seems petty. Maybe dropping that binder on the Thanksgiving table looked cruel. A small part of me still wrestled with those thoughts because that kind of conditioning does not disappear overnight. But then I remembered the $84,350. I remembered the Range Rover. I remembered my mother calling everything I had built nothing more than a lotion-rubbing hobby. I did not abandon my family. I simply stopped letting them pull me under with them. A full year has passed since I finally walked away from their constant demands. If someone had told me back then that peace could actually feel strange, I probably would have left. For months I still expected another fake emergency, another lecture about family loyalty, or another guilt trip disguised as love. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart jumped before I remembered that silence was no longer something to fear. It was something I had earned. Little by little, I learned what life looked like when every hour I worked and every dollar I earned actually belonged to me instead of disappearing into somebody else's bad choices. One weekend I painted over those awful mustard yellow walls. The next weekend I fixed the squeaky floorboard outside my bedroom. Later, I planted flowers beneath the old oak tree and finally bought a real dining table instead of eating off a folding chair. None of those things cost much, but every project reminded me that I was finally building my own future instead of constantly rescuing someone else's. The clinic kept growing far beyond anything I imagined back when I rented that tiny room behind the martial arts gym. I expanded into the suite next door, bought more rehabilitation equipment, hired another physical therapist, and built a small gym for patients recovering from surgery. Every time I watched someone walk again without pain after months of therapy, I remembered my mother's words about my lotion-rubbing hobby. Instead of getting angry, I just smiled. Her opinion no longer had any control over me. My work spoke for itself. One afternoon, a high school football player I had treated after a serious knee injury stopped by the clinic wearing his college team's jacket. He had earned a scholarship, and he wanted to thank me because he said I was one of the reasons he never gave up. After he left, I sat alone in my office holding the letter he had written me. That was when I realized what real success actually looked like. It was not luxury cars or pretending to be rich on social media. It was helping people rebuild their lives while quietly rebuilding my own. Brandon surprised me more than anyone. For a long time our conversation stayed simple. We mostly exchanged short texts about work or pictures of projects around his house. Then one day he admitted he had kept working the second job. He said it was exhausting, but it felt good knowing every bill was being paid with money he had earned himself. He told me they sold the Range Rover, canceled a long list of unnecessary subscriptions, and finally learned how to stick to a budget. He never asked me for money again. He never hinted about it either. Instead, he thanked me for refusing to rescue him one more time. That message meant more to me than any apology ever could because it showed me he had finally learned the lesson I had been trying to teach all along. Vanessa never really changed, at least not from what I heard through other relatives. But for the first time in my life, That was no longer my problem to solve. I honestly wished her well. I just refused to keep paying for the fantasy they had created. My mom stayed completely silent for months. Then, one afternoon, an envelope with no return address showed up at my clinic. Inside was an old picture of my grandmother and me planting tomatoes in her garden when I was a little kid. On the back, in her neat handwriting, she had written, "Helping someone stand is an act of love. Carrying them forever teaches them never to walk." I still do not know if my mom meant for me to see those words, or if she simply found the photo while cleaning out old boxes and mailed it without thinking. Either way, I sat alone in my office for nearly an hour, reading that sentence over and over. It felt like my grandmother was reaching across the years to remind me that I had not abandoned my family. I had only stopped making it easy for them to depend on me. That was the moment the last bit of guilt finally disappeared. When Thanksgiving came around again, I hosted dinner at my own house. It was nothing like the crowded holiday at Brandon's place the year before. There were no 45 people, no fake smiles, and no one pretending everything was perfect. It was a small dinner with a few close friends and several people I had met through the clinic who had slowly become family in all the ways that really mattered. We cooked together, laughed all afternoon, argued about football, accidentally burned one pan of dinner rolls, and still had one of the best meals I could remember. Somehow, everything tasted better because nobody was keeping score, asking for favors, or expecting anything except good company. Before we sat down to eat, I cut the first slice of homemade pecan pie with my grandmother's old pie server. For a moment, I just stood there looking around my dining room and listening to people who actually enjoyed being together. That was when I realized this was the tradition I wanted to protect. Not guilt, not obligation, not treating money like proof of love, just people choosing to spend time together because they genuinely cared about each other. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I washed the last dish, turned off the kitchen lights, and stood by the back window, looking out at the old oak tree. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt completely different. It did not feel lonely anymore. It felt peaceful. It felt like home. A year earlier, I had driven away from my family's house wondering if saying no had ruined my life. Standing there in my own home, with a mortgage paid on time, a clinic I had built from the ground up, friends who respected me, and a future that finally belonged to me, I realized something I wish I had understood years ago. Healthy relationships do not fall apart because someone sets boundaries. Boundaries only reveal which relationships were unhealthy all along. I did not lose my family the day I stopped giving them money. I only lost the illusion that love had to be bought. Looking around at the life I had built with my own two hands, I can honestly say it was the best investment I have ever made.